So remember how Anna Kasparian, in a relatively short time, went from being what I would consider to be one of the more respected friends of the stream to being a raving lunatic based purely on the fact that she glanced at a medical document in California which used the term birthing persons to refer to people who can give birth. This offended her, and now we're running down the track that we're running down. Yeah, so it's gotten worse, it seems. So a lot has happened. We're going to have to jump a few hoops, okay? So for some reason, she decided to defend Jessie Singal. Is that Singal? I don't actually know how it's pronounced. Singal? So this is a guy who defended another person who was arguing in favor of conversion therapy for trans youth. Just a transphobe, a lot of them, not special, small brain. Anna Kasparian defending the guy who defended that person. Jessie, small brain. Anna, in this case, right here, small brain. Jessie Singal, not a transphobe at all. They just want to suppress anything that questions the safety of puberty blockers / cross-sex hormones for minors. So what you can see here is like an echo of all the disingenuous bullshit conservative talking points in the issue. Like, not engaging with the criticisms, just like they disagree with you because they want to suppress any dissident information. And then like you look at the dissident information and it's like dumbasses scrolling with their own shit, like finger painting with it on paper. I don't know if it's a psychotic break or if the money's changed or what, but I think that Anna's acting in clear bad faith. I don't think this is like a fully genuine thing. Like what I'm often most concerned about is not the arguments that people give, it's the way they give them. Because I've talked to people who have had pretty significant disagreements with and not like minded it that much. Like, not all of this is on stream. I talk to a lot of people off stream, but I've talked to people who have been like kind of anti-trans, but in a way that suggests to me genuine ignorance of the subject and not like a pre-baked list of like anti-trans propaganda that they're disingenuously fronting by giving little snippets and like you know, like bumper sticker bits of counter arguments without engaging with the point, you know? Like for a million years over, I would rather deal with somebody who is anti-trans because they just think it's weird and don't get it than somebody who's anti-trans in like this civil, disagreeable, I just have some questions kind of way, who's like, you know, oh, well, they don't really disagree with Jessie. They're just trying to silence him. You know what I mean? It's that fake, grifty, disingenuous bullshit that I really, really hate. Which Anna is doing here, like completely and unreservedly. It's not good. Oh yeah. She argued with Juniper for a while, which is fun. It's mostly just Juniper saying "F you," which is also fun. They were talking about barricading a speaker. This was I remember the speaker who got barricaded. They were also a piece of shit. So this spiraled out of control. Who's this Juniper person anyway? High tier shit poster. Basically, there was this anti-trans person who like got held in a room for a couple hours. Whatever, I don't care. This led to an incredibly funny tweet from Anna, which old friend of the stream, Doe, has here screenshotted. Okay. The civil rights movement did not use the same strategies as the trans movement. They didn't barricade speakers they disagreed with in a classroom for 3 hours. They persuaded through nonviolence and showing America their humanity. Which is, I mean, I can't say it better than Doe has here. It said, the sanitized and child-friendly version of history makes liberals into reactionaries. And yeah, pretty much. Yeah. This is a shockingly stupid thing for Anna to say. Anna is a liberal. She's never been a socialist. But this is a degree of like blind liberal, like institutional, you know, civility faith that just I genuinely don't think that Anna would have been capable of making a statement like this a year ago. I don't think so. It's pretty shockingly bad on many levels. So we can break it down. So first of all, the civil rights movement enjoyed a lot of success for its generally peaceful tactics, but that's because we're talking about an aggregate of a movement that involved actions of millions of people. There were plenty of instances where people associated with the civil rights movement did stuff like this. In fact, here's an anecdote. In 1969, Samuel L. Jackson, the same one, yes, was expelled from historically black Morehouse College for locking board members in a building for 2 days in protest of the school's curriculum and governance. Included in this group of people who were held hostage was Martin Luther King Jr.'s own father, Martin Luther King Sr. So again, 2 days, Samuel L. Jackson and MLK's dad was in the room. Very funny. Obviously, like, applying a little bit of sense to this, the civil rights movement enjoyed success broadly, as peaceful movements tend to, because peaceful movements are more likely to attract larger amounts of participation. Violent movements don't get moms with children marching. Peaceful movements do, which is why they tend to have higher turnout, which means higher rate of sympathy, and so on. However, MLK was unpopular when he died with white folk, so, you know, popularity isn't everything, for one. And for two, even if you believe that doing things like what Martin Luther King Jr. did, sorry, not Martin Luther King Jr., what Samuel L. Jackson did is like counterproductive, you have to remember that in broader political advocacy movements, there will always be like optically bad things that you can focus on, and the decision to hyperfixate on them is a reactionary decision. So, for example, I think that rioting during the Black Lives Matter protest is almost entirely negative for the movement, but it's also an inevitable consequence of millions of people participating in a high-stakes civil rights protest. So the decision to hyperfixate on the riots rather than, like, you know, the broader movement and the broader goal is a reactionary one, because you're pulling attention away from the valid points and towards inevitable, even if regrettable, outbursts of what you consider to be negative or optically bad attention, which is exactly what Anna Kasparian is doing here, making a bunch of anti-trans arguments, defending Jessie Singal, making arguments against trans people broadly, and then going, well, look at this one instance of something that I consider to be optically bad, hyperfixate, hyperfixate, hyperfixate. MLK would have never did this, ignore the fact that, you know, people who followed MLK did this. Really stupid. And then, yes, as people are pointing out, Anna Kasparian, like a coward, deleted this tweet and then retweeted Destiny defending her, which is ever the death knell, the sword of Damocles for being a Destiny agreeing with you, hanging over her. It finally fell, but she took the cowardly choice, which was to delete and then retweet. Which, if you're going to retweet someone agreeing with you, why'd you delete? It's because you were getting ratioed. Come on, pathetic, pathetic. Jesus Christ. I'm actually more offended by the deletion than anything else. Just it's another thing that speaks to me of grifting, you know, or like at least insincerity. The idea of like, you know, like you have a position. I mean, maybe if she had like phrased it in a super bad way, but she kind of like she retweeted a fundamental agreement with her point. So it's just weak. It's weak. It's weak. She's debated Ben Shapiro. I just expect more spine. Okay, she's done debates. This isn't like a faffy YouTube video essayist, you know? Oh, I know, Zan. So, in addition to this Twitter kerfuffle, you know, Anna Kasparian, feeling perhaps politically disengaged, wandered and traveled to the Parthenon to meet with great intellectuals where she might find sympathy for her views. She went to the Adam and Sitch show. Hi, Sam.
That I was wrong about the Daily Wire thing. Now, I make predictions on the show all the time, and I have never been wrong before. So people, I've been making jokes about you might end up at the Daily Wire. That's not true?
No. It's funny because, you know, I'm going through something very real.
Nah, these guys are obsessed with me. Oh no, these guys are insane and they're obsessed with me. Yes. My biggest positive memory of these guys is them spending an 8-hour stream talking about me, not having me on during the stream, then inviting me on the nanosecond I ended my stream. Also, I met Adam Friended in person once. That one time I did the in real life meetup with Destiny and Modern Day Debate. And all Adam Prenda to do was uncomfortably stare at me while I did setup with modern day debate James. Like I didn't know he was going to be there, and I entered the warehouse room, and he was there, and I said hi, and he was like, "Hey," and that was it. And then I just talked modern day debate. How old is he? 15? Adam Friendon? No, believe it or not, he's older than me. So yeah, that's my key memory. I think I remember a couple times PSA Sitch did something vaguely indicative of him having a spine. I think he called out no bullshit for being like a Nazi.
Taking TYT with her.
What's up, Zan?
Very sincere, and it's uncomfortable, and it has not been an enjoyable process for me. It's been difficult. And so the internet being what it is, all sorts of people from all sorts of political ideologies have theories on like what's actually happening with me, right? And the main accusation, both from the left and the right, is that I'm grifting, which is hilarious because literally nothing has changed about my work.
And from the right, nobody on the right is accusing her of grifting. I've not seen a single person on the right accuse her of being a grifter. I mean, we know that she's grifting because we know, like, I've seen Anna Kasparian explain why the perspectives that she now holds are wrong very, very competently and
Yes, that's correct, Vote Night. This happened before the tweets.
like research and evidence to prove that. She knows that she's full of shit. We know she's grifting.
Work life. I'm in the same place. I have the same audience. The audience doesn't like some of what I have to say or some of the new conclusions I've come to. And so I wanted to kind of set the record straight about what I have personally experienced. I don't know what my political labels are at this point, right? Because I feel like I don't really fit anywhere. And that's just full honesty. It's, again, very uncomfortable for me. And I want to say that out of any point in my adult life, this is probably the point where I'm the most malleable and open to new information because of what I've experienced over the last.
So this is some Dave Rubin stuff, right? Literally, because Dave Rubin also came from TYT. You know, I'm feeling politically homeless. Oh, I feel like I'm not part of either side of the aisle. My mind is open and I'm absorbing all this info, and the left is being so intolerant and canceling me. And you guys, the right, are being so accepting of me suddenly being really stupid and reactionary. You're so,
Last few years. And I can get into details about that in just a moment. But
from chat, from Sargon of Akkad, I can't help but notice Anna Kasparian has begun the same journey that Dave Rubin undertook in 2016, 2017. Wow, I swear to God I said that before reading this. If I was Anna Kasparian, I read this, I would just end it all. Like, for real, though. Holy shit. Do you think she's like she read this and she went like, tee-hee? You know, like, what the oh my God.
That was the reason why I told Adam that, no, this isn't like a Daily Wire thing. I have no interest in working at the Daily Wire. I have no interest in leaving TYT. If anything, I just feel a responsibility to kind of correct what I got wrong in the past to the best of my ability and just do better moving forward. And
correct what she got wrong in the past?
Oh, yeah. I want to say, by the way, to be like totally clear, this isn't a pile-on. The problem here is not that Anna Kasparian suddenly had disagreeable views. It's that she suddenly had disagreeable views, expressed them in an idiotic way, got hyper defensive over them, attacked a bunch of people on the left, agreed with a bunch of people on the right, and then like it's not a matter of disagreeing. It's like her IQ plummeted 50 points, and she expressed all of her disagreeable opinions in a way that was maximally thick-headed and indicative of an unwillingness to engage with others. Has she even had a direct engagement with any person who's disagreed with her? Like, she said she wouldn't talk with me because I called her a which move, spineless. I don't fucking care. Like, she'll engage with Ben Shapiro, somebody who's like enables and is complicit in like a genocide against trans people. Like, that's fair game for her to debate. But engaging with people who disagree with her because they called her a come on, be a fucking adult. Come on here. Jesus Christ. She deserved getting called that, though. Yeah, of course she did. I don't retract. I can't believe there are people in my chat who are like, oh, you were too mean to her calling. Honestly, at this point, calling her a retard is charitable. It is not even close to the worst thing you could call her, given the route she's taken. It's not just, oh, she disagreed. That's it. It's over. I love talking with people who disagree. If Anna was sincere about disagreement, then I feel like she would have been more conciliatory, more bewildered by the blowback, and more willing to have people on to talk about it. You guys might notice that is what I do, for instance, whenever I have a take that gets me in trouble with you or with anyone else, it's that I usually have a bunch of people on to challenge me. And do I argue with them? Am I obstinate? Am I stubborn? Yeah, of course I am. But I'm clearly willing to engage and defend the things that I believe in. Whereas Anna, you know, who acts in good faith historically, who's willing to engage in her positions and defend them historically, you know, she does this whole grifty pivot, and then instantly all modes of communication are locked off. You can't get with her anymore. You can't contact her. You can't ask her questions. It's over. I don't know. Seems kind of weird. Sorry, unless you're Adam and Sitch, idiot reactionaries who've spent years fastidiously and stupidly attacking everything you claim to stand for, so you can go over to them and whine about being politically homeless, right? Yeah, I smell a shift in the winds. I smell money is what I smell. Now, Cenk Uygur has been non-stop defending her. She also said in this she doesn't care much about past comments Sitch and Adam have made about her because she has a thick skin. Apparently not so thick skin when it's you. Yeah, guys, okay, pardon me if this sounds like overbearing or whatever, but it's true and I'm not ashamed to say it, okay? The reason Anna doesn't want to talk to me is because I would humiliate her. That's it. It's the same reason she won't engage with any people on the left who are criticizing her right now. That's it. It has nothing to do with her being offended. It has nothing to do with her ego. It's the same reason a lot of people who disagree with me won't talk to me. Her positions are indefensible, and I would make that very obvious. And she knows it, and a lot of people know it, and you guys know it, so she won't talk with me. It is that simple. There's no, like, it just bothers me, even in retrospect, there were people in my chat who were like, well, I think you really hurt her feelings when you... No. She's been doing this for far longer than I have. I promise you, that did not break her line or whatever. That was not the end of it, okay? There's a reason for all of this. It's very disappointing to me that she would go this direction. I thought I had a pretty good read on her in terms of sincerity, you know? But that's how it is. That's how life is. Any alternative possibility besides grift? Gas leak. I'm kind of not joking. I think it's a grift, or I think it's brain cancer, and there's a tumor in her brain that's making her act different. It's one of those two. It's not. It is definitely not a perfectly sincere, honestly motivated shift in perspective. It is something chemical, or it's grifting. Anna defended gas stove, so maybe. Yeah, the gas has taken over her brain. She was offended at the idea of having... It's 100% not that. She's too smart for it to be that. You can't outsmart gas leaks, Annie. I'm sorry to say. I think I'm a smart guy. Okay, a gas leak's on a whole other level. Can't outsmart gas leaks. Can't outsmart brain cancer. Be a smart boy. It's not gonna get you around that. I'd show you all of Cenk's tweets, but there were like 50 million. They're basically like, it's the same thing. It's, wow, you're so tolerant, but you're like canceling us. Blah, blah. There's one other snag to this story, though, which is a trans employee of TYT recently quit. Given the timeline here, it's an interesting concurrence, and I'm going to take a look at their video. Now, I will say this, okay? This Ben Carollo person has me blocked. So they're definitely a bad person. Kind of not joking. So I'm not defending anything about them. I have no idea. They're a tanky. Yeah, that tracks. So I don't fantasize about like kulaks to death. So they probably wouldn't care for my political views either, you know? However, I'm interested in their perspective. And I mean that sincerely because I haven't watched the video and I don't know its contents. With no expectations whatsoever, and giving me a moment to not talk so I don't cough a bunch, why I left TYT. Can we get their pronouns? No, because they blocked me. Oh, she, her? Okay.
Alright, so in case it wasn't obvious from the title of this video, I'm done with TYT. Now, before we get into like everything about this isn't about all...
It's pretty obvious. Well, you can't. It's pretty obvious if a person's they, them. I don't know. And whenever I see trans people or whatever, you know what I think? You know what I think? Okay? I don't think, yeah, oh, you know, what's your pronouns? Oh, you look like pronoun this, pronoun that. I think, well, you look gay. Because that's what they think. You all look, oh, wow, you have an undercut? You've got eyebrow piercings? You homo? Okay. I'm taking a break from coughing. Take it away.
All of the hosts. There are actually a ton of people at TYT that I think are genuinely cool people. This is mostly about Cenk and Anna. But of course, since like they're the people that are like the big names on the network and Cenk kind of like owns the company, it's a pretty big deal when they do something like, I don't know, become incredibly transphobic and start what appears to be a ridiculous right-wing grift. I mean, literally everything from the things that they said about homeless people to the stuff that they said about abolitionists and their general sort of like refusal to hear the people that are criticizing them and saying, no, this is what people are actually trying to say. You're not really hearing what we're
for context, Anna lives in California and shoots every homeless person she sees.
saying, or you're not listening. Now, we're not going to focus on literally all of the right-wing things that they've been doing lately, especially in the past year. They've done this pivot where they go after prison abolitionists, people who say defund the police, homeless people, and anybody that they think is a radical left. Because, you know, doing the enlighten the centrist thing is really a smart move in this year, 2023. Right? I still got that calendar right. No, we're mostly going to be focusing on their transphobia, which they have been escalating rapidly, which I guess is something that everybody really predicted would happen starting, I think about 6 months ago, 4 months ago, when Anna Kasparian put out a tweet complaining about the use of the term birthing person, which is really...
Okay. We've covered a lot of this. I was interested in, like, information on their experiences personally,
like reading through like research papers about what would be like the best for my transition and how it would go and things like that. So I like to think with my back, by this, that, or the other thing, you're missing these details. Hey, you're literally just being transphobic right now. I even reached out to people within the network to say like, hey, I would like to maybe sit down with Cenk and maybe even have an on-air conversation where I could talk about how all of this stuff actually works. You know, I may not be a doctor, but I like to think that in my master's degree in biotechnology and my experience literally being a trans person, who, by the way, most
How
trans
do you
people
go from master's in biotech to TYT? Oh, shit. Do you think she manufactured the brain virus that infected Anna? Is this like a Yakub/white people thing?
will do a ton of research about hormones before they get on them because a lot of doctors don't really know that much about it. So that's actually something that I did, where I spent a ton of time like reading through like research papers about what would be like the best for my transition, how it would go and things like that. So I like to think with my background, with some experience in biology and, you know, reading a ton about how specifically hormone replacement therapy works for trans women like myself, I might know a thing or two about all of these things. And I figured, hey, if Cenk doesn't know about this, maybe it'd be interesting for him to learn. But with that though, he wasn't really interested in having an on-air conversation because, you know, he seemed pretty intent on not changing his mind, but he was open to having a phone conversation. So I handed it to him on that, like, yeah, great. So we had a chat over the phone. Now, obviously, I'm not going to get into the details of literally every single thing that we...
Yeah, the TYT lab leak theory. I don't blame Cenk for not wanting to have this conversation on air. If I was... Well, you know what? I mean, I am an employer. I employ White, Tempest, and Ryan. If they had a disagreement with me, I would not want to have a disagreement with my employee live. That sounds like a horrible idea. I would rather have that disagreement privately, maybe a conversation live, but like that sounds like some nervous ground.
Talked about. I'm just going to give you a brief synopsis because that's really all that's important. And there are two main sticking points that I really want to touch on that happened within that phone call that I think were really a sign of like how far things were going to go and honestly how much further things might go from here still. The first sticking point was Cenk seemed convinced of this idea that I'm living in some sort of bubble. They've even said it on the air that people fighting for trans rights are all living in some sort of bubble. The problem with that is...
No. Okay, that's not a fair summary of their position. Cenk and Anna keep doing this thing where they're like, as lefties, shouldn't we all work together on shared positions we all believe in rather than tearing each other apart over these like niche issues, ignoring the fact that all of this started because Anna Kasparian like went on a tirade about the term birthing persons. Like it's so disingenuous, the idea that this is like other people instigating the conflict as opposed to Anna. Like, you might notice a pattern which keeps happening, which is that all the drama around Anna Kasparian fades away as long as she shuts the fuck up. Like, this isn't something that keeps happening organically against her. She says something stupid and then brings a bunch of hate down on herself deservedly for saying something stupid. It's not like there's this constant buzz that she's responding to, you know?
I have a lot of random trans people from a ton of different political perspectives that will like reach out to me about like, hey, how are things going at TYT? Or hey, you're really inspiring, you know, stuff like that. And I also have like a decent circle of friends and family, many of which who are sort of all over the place politically. I told Cenk very specifically, you know, I have friends that are like big Joe Biden fans, right? Like they are theoretically to your political right. His reaction to that was quite literally laughter, which I just thought was like so hilarious. And he just kind of wouldn't believe. He was like, no, you're in a bubble. You're in a bubble. And I kept pressing. I was like, no, Cenk, you don't understand. I matched with a random person on Tinder, and the first thing that they started talking to me about is how transphobic TYT has been lately, because I think that they had just kind of figured out who I was. And Cenk,
Okay, well that's not really a good argument. Like if you match with somebody who matches with a trans person on Tinder and they recognize you and they're like, "Oh, I agree with you on that." Like that's not I mean, I've matched with people on Tinder who are like, "Oh, I love your channel." And then I unmatch them. Cuz I'm not fucking one of you people. Um, gotta be careful.
was like, no, see, you're living in a bubble. And it's like, yeah, okay, buddy. That completely random person I matched with on Tinder is just part of the bubble that I'm magically living in. But really, that kind of gave me the vibe of like, oh, Cenk really thinks that like every trans person is part of some sort of ideology, that we're of like a strict like political viewpoint, and that we don't just exist as like a type of person that exists, you know? It really did seem like Cenk was of the mind that to be transgender is to subscribe to a very specific political viewpoint, which I don't know if you know this, but that's actually something that the like most unhinged transphobes are like spewing as conspiracy theories and stuff like that. They're like, these trans rights activists are all part of this strict ideological group and they're infecting people with this radical gender ideology, is literally what like these unhinged right-wingers are saying. But it does kind of seem like Cenk is just kind of in that camp of like, oh, if you're trans, you must by definition be like some sort of radical leftist. You know, clearly like not connecting the dots about people like Caitlyn Jenner or Blair White.
I do think that Cenk kind of hits on this pretty often. Anna unfollowed me on Twitter. Cenk hasn't. So Cenk tweets nonstop. I mean, he's got the hasty Twitter fingers. I mean, he argues with a lot of people in the replies. Despite getting ratioed on literally everything he tweets, I actually kind of respect it. I don't know if I could do this, man. I don't know if I would want to tweet nonstop if every tweet that I sent out had almost as many replies as they did likes. I think it's indicative of great personal strength, which is why I still kind of respect him. Anna is a coward. She tweets shit, deletes it, then retweets like Destiny and Adam and Sitch agreeing with her. Cenk will tweet shit and then just plant it there, plant his feet in the dirt like a sumo wrestler, you know, like a Shinto god, and stare you down even as everyone disagrees with him. I respect it. Of course, his main way of tweeting is by just asking rhetorical questions nonstop. So you think talk show hosts should say, well, you don't like what we said, so you don't think we should speak at all? You don't think that political commentators should talk about politics? Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. He specifically spoke ill of the chick we're looking at right now. She quit, so she is too pure for us. She's an unhinged person who's called me evil, racist, transphobe, and other insults, lied about our private conversation. People took serious issue with this, but to be honest, I don't actually have an issue with insulting former employees if they actually are pieces of shit. Now, obviously, leading into this, we have every reason to believe that Cenk is in the wrong, so I'm not going to take his side presumptuously. But a lot of people seemed offended at the idea of insulting former employees in general. But, like, he's insulted Dave Rubin, so, you know.
Existing, which honestly was just really, really frustrating to have in that conversation. Because the people that are in my circle of friends are people who, like, literally have been homeless in their lives and people who literally are making, like, ridiculous amounts of money. I have a pretty broad circle, you know. Something that kind of happens sometimes when you're, like, a polyamorous trans woman that's, like, a little bit popular on the internet. It turns out that you can build a pretty wide circle of people from, like, different perspectives and backgrounds and stuff. I know, what a shocker. But then there's the other part that was, like, even more disturbing, which was, I pointed out something that Anna had said on the air, where I was like, hey...
There are so many jokes that I want to make about polyamorous trans women who are popular on the internet right now, and I'm going to withhold all of them.
Anna said this bit about doctors giving hormone therapy to children because they were afraid of being called transphobic. And I was very clear. I was like, you know that's not happening,
thank you.
Right? Like, you know that isn't happening. And Cenk's response was, you know, I don't know. See, I could see it happening, though. And I'm like, no, but you couldn't, because you know if that actually did happen, that would be medical malpractice, and it would be like a federal case to just give kids hormone replacement therapy because you didn't want to seem transphobic. That's ridiculous. On its face is ridiculous. Anybody who knows anything about politics would know that not only would that be a federal case, but it would be like national headlines. Every single newspaper would turn that into the biggest story for months. I mean, literally the biggest story transphobes have had for the past 2 months is Dylan Mulvaney being on a can of Budweiser. So do you think that they really wouldn't make it national headlines even if it just happened once? But no, Cenk still doubled down and was like, I don't know.
She is completely correct in the idea that doctors are absolutely not doing procedures because they're afraid of being called not woke or whatever. Like, doctors will turn down a hysterectomy because you don't have 5 kids and your husband hasn't come in and personally given his blessing for it. I don't think that doctors are out here performing bottom surgery on 4-year-olds because a mom with pink hair told them they'd cancel them on Twitter otherwise.
Could see that happening, and it's like, great, we have somebody who is like the head of a news network who is like basing political opinions off of things that he could see happening. Like, what a wonderful position to be in at this point. Like, the real brilliant 5-head political take right there. You know, I could imagine this scenario, and that really says something about society, doesn't it? And that had to be one of the most unhinged parts of that phone call. But whatever.
Like
I sent him some research papers about trans people in sports that went into detail pretty clearly about, like, hey, there's no evidence that there's any reason to discriminate against trans people in sports. And that was like the conclusion that it came to pretty firmly, right? Hey, there's no evidence that we should discriminate against trans people. What a wild concept. It's amazing. I know. But Cenk apparently has learned the wrong lesson from that, especially when you look at some of the clips from his most recent rant about trans people that he just did the other day regarding trans people in sports and the extreme radical activists that support trans people in sports. Right. Now, let's listen really quick to some of the clips from this rant to see where exactly Cenk is on these issues.
No, the hormone blockers do lower the testosterone. They do even things out a lot, right? But men still have other physical advantages, like we maintain mass much better. And to give you a sense of how unfair this is, that where she won in Canada with 275-pound bench press, I bench press 275, okay? And that's not a big deal.
Do you? Cenk, you're getting up there in years, man. Do you? I believe you used to. Do you still? I want to see that. I'm calling cap. I want to see that. I want to see a video. Just saying.
For a guy.
This is so ridiculous. This is literally so ridiculous. Okay, think about this. He's like, oh, this trans woman won a competition where she broke a record bench pressing 275 pounds. And clearly, that's unfair. Because I, a cisgender man, can easily bench press 275 pounds. Therefore, there must be an advantage. And it's like, my guy, she literally broke a record. Like, what are you talking about? She clearly wasn't having like an incredibly easy time. You're stumbling so close to the point. Like, Cenk is literally incapable in this moment of separating trans women from cisgender men in his own brain right here. Like, he is fundamentally.
I do think that Cenk is anti like trans participation in sports. I'm pretty sure that's the position he holds. Oh, speaking of, did you guys know? Is it MMA? A trans man is kicking ass right now. Wait, trans man MMA win. Yeah, here it is. World's first trans male boxer wins 3rd fight over cis man. Obviously, trans men and trans women have different, there are different concerns with regards to their viability in sports with hormone use and stuff, but still pretty impressive, huh? Ranked 99th in America. Wow. Okay, so technically, Manuel is in the top 100 boxers in America as a trans guy. That's pretty good. I think that's pretty good. Yeah. Look, the trans chick doing sports thing is complicated. From the research and opinions that I've seen, I still feel like, and this is just synthesizing a large amount of information that I've read, people disagree, it's an ongoing discussion. If you're a trans chick and you've been on hormones for 2 years, you're probably fine to compete with cis women. It's complicated. I've gotten so many emails about it with like very, very specific info and this and that. But I really do think that seems to be the case. That's not necessarily fair for like trans chicks who have just transitioned because they'd have to wait 2 years. But like, that's one of those unfairness of life things. I don't think you should be able to just day one of transition, I'm a woman now, watch me kick this ass, like kick everyone's ass. I don't, That's silly, but that's not really happening. Look around. How many trans athletes are there? Not many. Trans people generally don't want to do athletics. They want to code and suck. The idea that this is like a substantial, like we're talking like dozens, maybe a few hundred people across the United States. That's not, it's not a substantial enough. I just don't care.
Mentally refusing to connect the dots that hormones maybe actually have an impact on, I know this is wild, your ability to maintain mass. That maybe perhaps like your biological traits are not dictated by some ethereal assignment of gender that you were given at birth, and maybe perhaps are actually dictated by the hormones that are like flowing through your body, telling your body what to do. Like, could he have used a sillier example? He's trying to say that trans women have an advantage in sports because he personally, as a cisgender man that has never taken estrogen, would be able to beat them all at a bench press competition. This is just on its face ridiculous. But just wait, because it's gonna get worse.
I mean, it's okay, but it's not that big a deal. You're gonna put that in the women's division. I don't care how many hormone blockers you had. It's gonna make a difference, okay? And in the limited cases.
Well, no. If a trans woman took hormone blockers and then took estrogen, they wouldn't have benefited from male puberty. They would not have an advantage. The whole thing, before puberty, boys and girls aren't like athletically different, at least not to a substantial degree. Before puberty, boys and girls are just stupid blobs. They're little babies. Puberty is when guys suddenly get much larger and stronger. If you don't have that puberty, the advantage doesn't exist. There might be some like very edge case stuff that goes beyond hormone expression, but man, if you've taken the hormone blockers and you've been on E for 2 years, nah, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
They're not like instantly breaking every record like Trump is saying, right? But they're doing better than the average bear.
That's not true.
Are
Like,
they?
literally show me any statistic that shows that trans women are performing better than average in sports. In fact, that's part of the research that I showed Cenk, that it actually isn't happening. It literally is not happening. There is yet to be a trans woman win at the Olympics, despite the fact that trans women have been allowed at the Olympics for a long time now. Once again, it is almost like Cenk is refusing to take in the information that people are presenting to him and is just making up things in his head and taking that as reality.
And here, I'll add one thing that's really important. And we shot a show, I don't know if you guys are ever gonna see it, we shot a pilot just this weekend with a mixed Republican and Democratic family, okay? I asked them about trans rights. Should they have the same rights, same exact rights in housing, employment, etc.? Every one of them, including hardcore Trump people, were like, yes, they should have the same exact rights.
Exactly.
When I asked about this topic, every one of them, except one, 6 out of 7, were like, no, not competing in sports.
Okay, that's absolute bullshit. Okay, so the trick that conservatives will play is they'll be like, oh yeah, I want everyone to be treated equally, but I also think that like being trans in public is the form of grooming. Like that's, you can't take, they do the same thing with the civil rights movement. They'll be like, yeah, I think that everyone, like there are conservatives who will literally say, I think everyone should be treated equally, but I think the civil rights movement is an illegitimate imposition of federal force on state law, and it should be up to the state to decide whether or not businesses can put out signs saying no blacks, no Jews, no Irish. Like I have heard this from conservatives. You can't take them at face value on that. The idea that like conservatives would be okay with trans people if you gave up the sports issue is such bullshit. Because the only reason they're pretending to care about the sports issue is as a proxy attack on trans people broadly. Like they don't care about sports, or certainly not women's sports.
Doesn't make sense. Men and women are different, okay? And so whether that's, we can get into continue that scientific debate, but as far as the American people go and politics go, you're gonna lose them. Whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter. You're gonna lose them.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We should adjust all of our political opinions based off of what's popular and what's unpopular, right? Because here's the thing, Cenk, you personally...
Yeah, I know this woman is a tanky. Polyamorous, trans woman, popular online. It's a coin flip on tanky or Nazi, aka Nazi. I know, it's fine, but that's not relevant to what we're going over right now.
As somebody that works in the news, have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to actually inform people with the facts and not worry about like, oh, how are they going to worry about like what I'm saying? No, you just have to like give people the facts. and that as somebody who is working in media, you do actually have an influence over people's opinions. But it's playing this game of, oh, I want to sound and seem really smart, regardless as to whether that not something is actually true, and so I'm going to say something that's not true just because it's a big smart brain thing to say. You know, I think discriminating against trans people is okay as a smart galaxy brain strategic move, because we got to win over all of these people who just don't understand yet. Like, can we stop doing this? Can we stop playing this game of like, I really want to look smart, so I'm afraid of saying something that is literally true? Or like
Well, I think this analysis, it lacks something, which is primarily that it's not just that the logic is bad, it's that the underlying facts that supply the logic are bad as well. For instance, you know, this is an extremely hot take, but I'll defend it. If I could magically know that giving up on the trans sports issue would then lead conservatives in America to just uncritically accept the rights of trans people and leave them alone, if I knew that, I would take that deal in a heartbeat. A few hundred trans athletes in exchange for the complete political safety of a class of millions? Oh, yeah, that's not fair. Those trans athletes should be able to compete and play fairly. But if that actually was the deal, then yeah, I'd take that in a heartbeat. That's not the deal, though. It's a fake deal. So it goes beyond just cruel utilitarian politics. It's just, you can't reason with the right in this way. You have to take other approaches. There are ways to get conservatives more permissive of trans people. It's possible. It's just, you know, Yank. I say it different every time. I don't go with that method.
Up for what is just morally correct. I mean, quite literally, if you don't have enough evidence, why do you think the default should be discrimination? Explain this. Why is the default discrimination? And heaven forbid we stand up for people and say, no, trans people should just be allowed to play in sports. That's good, actually. That's fine. There's no evidence to suggest that we should discriminate against trans people because of some sort of biological advantage, because of course, that's like a silly, nonsensical idea. And also, wild concept, women with PCOS have a ton of advantages in sports. Are we going to discriminate against them too? Right? Once again, this is a failure to understand that trans people are just a type of person, right? This is thinking that transness is something extra, which is another vibe that I got with Cenk over the phone, was just this feeling that it seemed like he thought that transitioning and being trans was like this extra special thing that people did for fun or to make a...
Here, I agree with this. This is an interesting thought experiment, okay? So, would there be as much kerfuffle over the advantages that trans women have, the alleged advantages that trans women have in women's sports, if them being trans and them transitioning and all the advantages presumed thereof were genetically coded and innate, as opposed to something you choose to do? Transitioning is something you choose to do. Or to put it another way, if you took all of the imagined advantages of being a trans woman in women's sports, I say imagined for reason here, and those were just a condition that cis women could have, the same way that cis women can have gigantism or PCOS or hormonal imbalances or thyroid disorders. If they could have those advantages and it was just genetically locked, you guys know what I'm getting at, right? They would be allowed to compete. They would be allowed to. There's not really a precedent for, oh, this person has a genetic condition that makes them athletically better, therefore they shouldn't be able to compete. What? No, that's why they should be allowed to compete. Michael Phelps is half fish. The only reason people are concerned about the alleged advantages with transgender women in women's sports is because they think of transitioning as a choice that you can make in order to get an advantage over cisgender women. Of course, in reality, that's not happening. But it's interesting to think about that. Like, if you think of all the advantages, like, oh, well, some cis women have this condition where they have taller, lankier bodies, more muscle mass, Adam's apple, blah, blah, blah. It's from a hormone thing. Oh, wow, they must be really good at sports. If there were cis women that were born with that condition, you know what people would say? Wow, born athlete. But because it's being trans, as opposed to it just being a condition, it's subject to political discrimination. Just more evidence to the fact that this is all achingly arbitrary, unless they are black. Yes, there have been instances of discrimination based on higher levels of testosterone that have disproportionately affected women of color. I think that that's like broadly a race thing. Certainly, it doesn't invite the same culture war discourse, but, you know, whatever.
political statement and not just literally part of like who trans people are. Once again, this is just a failure to understand transness as just a type of person that exists. And the idea of, oh, you're just losing the average person, you're losing, I can win over Republicans on like the housing and all these other things, is just absurd on its face. Because really, Cenk, are people just going to vote for a Republican because they're very angry that there's a trans person playing sports ball? Come on, like, be real. Be real. Especially because, and this is another thing that I pointed out to Cenk, if you look at the states where Republicans made their entire campaign just attacking trans people in sports, you know what happened when Democrats actually stood in defense of trans people? Oh yeah, that's right. The Republicans lost miserably. Nobody is thinking about this. People are not like just like struggling to fall asleep at night. Oh my God. Oh, I can't even believe trans people are playing sports. What am I gonna do? Nobody's doing that. Like, there's a tiny group of people who are obsessed with trans people that are like going on a tirade, but that's not the majority. If you look at Michigan, in Michigan, the Republicans made their entire campaign just like, we hate trans people. And what happened now? Oh, the Democrats have a trifecta in Michigan now. And every state where Republicans have tried to focus on just attacking trans people, it has literally undermined their own support. So what is happening right here seems to be very clearly Cenk hiding behind hypothetical people's opinions in order to mask his own opinion. He doesn't think that trans people should be allowed to play professional sports. And instead of just saying that, which I guess on some level he does, he hides behind, oh, you know, the American people aren't ready for trans people to play sports, you know? But it gets even worse because he basically follows this up by blaming trans athletes and anybody who dares to just support trans people existing for all of the transphobic legislation that is passing across the country and for Republicans winning.
That is incredibly selfish of activists who are betraying their own community. Because when you say I don't care about elections, who cares about the Democrats? That isn't the point. The Republicans introduced over 600 bills against the LGBTQ community. That's because of elections, and over 70 of them have already passed. When you say I don't care about winning and I don't care about elections, what you're saying is I'm super selfish leftist activist and I'd like to build my cloud. But meanwhile, I'm willing to throw trans people and the entire LGBTQ community under the bus, knowing that these bills are gonna pass.
Sorry, I have to take the enlightened centrist in this perspective. I disagree with the logic he's bringing to this. However, the broader statement he's making, which is a problem online with lefties, let's be real, a lot of trans people doing this, well, both sides hate me, so why even bother shit? Or like the people who are like, well, it's under a Biden administration, all these anti-trans bills are happening, and then you look and they're all happening in red states. And then in Michigan, like Democrats take slight, like by a hair margin, they take power and instantly like bring down 1,000 years of progressivism on the state. But so I honest to God, I do hate the anti-electoralists who deliberately misrepresent American politics and American proceduralism in an effort to build up this like doomer cult of like tanky bullshit. So I'm going to say that I actually would much rather have a world full of people like Cenk than a world full of people like them, because I do think they do more harm, like per voice, than what Cenk's messaging is doing here. But they're both bad. So yeah, that's my enlightened centrist perspective.
Because we're laser focused on a losing issue.
And he's like, oh, if Republicans win because the trans people want to play sports, it'll be all your fault. And like, how disgusting is that actually?
And I do think that's what she's pointing out here. That is bullshit that Cenk is saying that, because that isn't what's costing the Dems their victory. That's not the problem. So they're both, yeah, okay, just to be clear, electoralism is a necessary tool in the system we operate in. It's not everything, but it's something. But we're not failing in electoral efforts because we're defending trans people in sports. Because the trans people in sports thing is a psyop. Anyway, it's not the real issue. It's about trans people. Okay.
You are genuinely gonna blame people whose existence is like actively being criminalized by Republicans for their own oppression? Like give me a break. This is actually your fault more than it is any trans person's fault. Cenk, personally you, it is more his fault, because what Cenk is doing is Cenk is going to an audience of people who are presumably on the left and telling them, no, it's okay to be transphobic. It's okay to compromise with the rights of trans people. It's okay to say that we should just discriminate against trans people in some ways if it makes these Republicans happy. And like, that is unbelievably disgusting. It's such a shameless thing to do. Like, how on God's green earth do you think that you get to call yourself some sort of like principled leftist who's out to do the right thing? How can you call yourself the home of progressives when you are actively cutting deals with fascists about the rights of trans people and then spreading transphobic nonsense to an audience of like millions of people? It is deeply irresponsible, and fundamentally, it's pathetic. This is genuinely embarrassing. The degree to which this is irresponsible just knows no bounds, because there are so many people that are literally looking to people like Cenk for opinions, and he's literally just giving them an open invitation to be as transphobic as they want to be, because it's politically strategic.
They'll say that, but okay, you don't care about the politics? Let's just, for once in your life, think strategically about what that means. that means that you're going to continue pushing the Democratic Party to unequivocally support everything that the trans activists want, even if it's unpopular among the electorate. That means they're not getting reelected. That means they're going to lose to Republicans. Republican lawmakers who...
And now we're doing this like the trans mafia is forcing you to defend Zer pronoun. Look, it's not, Anna, you're not being canceled by like a cabal of hyper online. You freaked out about the term birthing persons. You're the online one.
Are passing draconian, disgusting legislation in various states right now as we speak against the transgender community.
Look at this. You're gonna push your Democratic Party to unequivocally support everything the trans activists want. Like, shut up. Literally, shut the f up. This is so embarrassing. Like, Anna Kasparian, and like, look, I'm gonna be real. This is my personal opinion, but whatever. I think Anna Kasparian is genuinely personally transphobic. I'm just gonna say it right now. She's like saying and doing all of the things. She's referring to every trans person as a trans rights activist. Referencing every trans person as a trans rights activist is just, on its face, literally transphobic. And it's one of the things that transphobes have been pushing for a long time. Is just,
she does have a history of doing the progressive until it affects her kind of like white woman soccer mom shit. Like the anti-homeless stuff and the like crime stuff. Like, I think she was justifying some of her takes on homeless people literally from like her personal experiences with homeless people, which it's always kind of like a red flag when a person has what seems like a well-held political belief, but then they have a personal experience and they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Sometimes that can be fine, like if you learn something new, but sometimes it's like, you know, I have principles until I'm inconvenienced, and then, you know, you kind of have to find out where people stand on that. So I guess in this case, the term birthing persons was set her off. I don't know.
calling every trans person a trans rights activist. I mean, and the media more broadly does this as well. And this whole idea of like, you're going to lose the Republicans, you're going to lose the Republicans if you cater to these trans people, once again, is entirely debunked. Most people are fine with trans people, and when Republicans make their entire platform about attacking trans people, it actually does undermine their political success.
She said on Adam and Sitch that she was sexually assaulted over clothes by a homeless dude. That started the crime wave obsession. Here we are. Obviously it's awful that that happened to her, but that's such a shitty way of forming your political opinions. You should form your political opinions on homelessness, crime, criminology, sociology, based on data and analysis. If you're doing it based on anecdotes, like what, like that's the same shit. Like then it's nothing. Then like there's no opinions. Like none of it matters at all. Like why have political opinions if you're just like throwing yourself to the whims of personal fate and inconvenience? Should a person feel they have a moral right to be racist because they've had personal negative experiences with black people? Like, you know, oh, I was fine with this, that, the other group until this, that, the other. What opinions change? Like the broader housing first policies that homeless people need, like what does that logic shift because you become one of the thousands of statistics every year, you know? Like it doesn't make what happened to you any less horrible. My hot take is that like I actually don't care that much if people are personally distasteful towards the homeless, because homeless people are, by basically every metric of civil society, often quite distasteful, often purposefully. What I care about is the political opinions you have. If a person has the willpower to have distaste towards the homeless, but then go home, take a deep breath and go, yeah, we really got to get them out of that situation. Homeless or housing first policies, let's go. I think that takes a lot of will, but like I think that's a fine thing. I grew up in LA, which has a serious homeless problem. I'm in Seattle, which has a serious homeless problem. It's difficult in either city to go out and do something in a downtown area without seeing homeless people. And a lot of homeless people are minding their own business, and a lot of them aren't. A lot of homeless people are kind of scary, dangerous, off-putting, smell bad. And is that their fault? Well, sometimes they make choices directly that they didn't have to make. Sometimes it's a broader social thing. You can't untangle that just at face value, but you can always support the broader political positions, right? Like you can go downtown in LA and think like, oh, I hope I don't interact with a homeless person today. I just don't want to deal with it. And then go home and think like, wow, well, you know, the reason there were so many homeless people is because of all these horrible policies and blah, blah. So if your positions are being changed, that's a huge red flag. Does everyone understand what I'm talking about? It's one of those things that I am sympathetic towards, that distaste, because, well, I think Anna is in LA, right? And again, I grew up in LA and like I knew a lot of homeless people. I was friends with one. There was a homeless busker on Beverly Drive outside of the place that I worked when I had a job when I was in high school, and I would give a portion of my pay to her. and she was a, I think, recently divorced woman who had actually lost the house and didn't have any other option. My money was just like spending money, right? I had a home, so I gave a portion of my pay to her, and then like I saw her get harangued by the cops a couple of times, and one day I never saw her again. She was nothing but sweet to me. She was nothing but pleasant to talk to. But for every one person like that, I've met like a bunch of greasy, like drug addicted guys jerking off through a hole in their pants, you know? I think it's okay to feel distaste towards that, but it shouldn't change the underlying politics.
Live in a country that is very much not a democracy. It has all this gerrymandering and all these other things. And so Republicans still have like seats in a lot of places. I know, wild concept. But genuinely, if you look at their poll numbers in response to them focusing on just trans people existing, it's not working. It is genuinely not working for them. It is undermining the electoral success. But of course, you can't not take the opportunity to blame trans people for their own oppression. Am I right? It's really great that Anna Kasparian is doing this.
And by the way, you schmucks, you're falling exactly into the right-wing trap. The Republicans, they tried.
Was this the same homeless person that said this $20 isn't really going to change my life? Yes, it was.
Everything. They tried anti-gay stuff, it didn't work. They tried trans bathrooms, you remember that? That didn't work. Kicking the transgender community out of the military, that didn't work. They drilled in until they finally found a little tiny nugget of like, hey, trans folks in like competitive sports seems a little bit much. And you don't engage them in that fight. They lose on everything else. But idiot activists, yes, I just called you an idiot. Activists go in there and go, no, I'm gonna fall right into that trap, and I'm gonna fight on the only losing ground we have so we can elect more Republicans so they can pass more anti-LGBT laws.
This is just very naive political analysis from Cenk, leaving aside the fact that like, if they're attacking you on every trans-related issue, why would you believe that the trans athlete thing is like a sincere point that if they're allowed to have, they would stop at? Like this is like saying this is like having 5 towns the enemy is attacking, and you beat them back away from 4 of them, and then you're going to try and defend the 5th town, which is a bit harder to defend, and there's like good people living there, and then your advisor is like, no, leave that be, because after they get the 5th town, they'll leave the other 4 alone. Like, they'll be done. Again, if leaving a tiny town alone and leaving it to burn could end a war with like millions of people involved, then sure, okay, but it won't.
Great, well played. I'm sure your clout and your brand is doing great.
These clips are just so infuriating, genuinely. Like, that talk about betrayal is just so, like, pathetic and embarrassing and shameless, coming from Cenk and Anna right here. Like, oh, you're betraying the trans community by fighting for trans rights. How dare you just say that trans people should be treated equally in society? Don't you know that you're supposed to live as second-class citizens so that I can feel better about myself when I give you rights?
I don't think she's accurately identifying the specific type of brainworms that Cenk is that Cenk is operating under here. Yeah, weak analysis, but you know, whatever. Not everyone can be me. Also, she has me blocked on Twitter, so who cares?
Literally spare me. This is ridiculous. But I think the real icing on the cake here is this tweet where Anna Kasparian has decided to unilaterally declare Jessie Singal to not be a transphobe, despite, and this is what's really wild.
My camera's mirrored, so I try to point the way I think will point upward to the screen, but it's this way, yeah.
Jessie Singal literally talking to whistleblowers at a medical facility that appear to have made some significant HIPAA violations about their patients in sharing the information that they did with Jessie Singal. And of course, you have him running around spewing all of the same transphobic nonsense that basically your average transphobe is going to be spreading. You know, the types of things about like, oh, we don't know about hormones, and oh, HRT for kids, and oh my God, it's so terrifying. Oh my goodness, they're turning all of our kids transgender. Oh my God.
Singal is a good faith, I think, critical thinker. I'm subscribed to Blocked and Reported. I have listened to endless podcast episodes from Blocked and Reported. I haven't seen anything from Jessie Singal that communicates to me that he is a transphobe, that he is a bad person. He did straight news reporting on basically what, you know, some of the risks could be when it comes to transitioning literal kids with puberty blockers and then cross-sex hormones. And through his reporting, which I'm very sad to say I didn't really come across until this year, I learned that I was wrong about a bunch of other things.
Like, Jessie Singal literally is one of the like more notable transphobic people that is out there putting out misinformation about trans people and actively stoking the flames of this big wave of anti-trans legislation. And it's just deeply shameless to come in and say, no, I definitely think, as a cisgender woman, think that Jessie.
I think what says it best is that on Jessie Singal's Wikipedia page, from Wikipedia, Singal has been described as one of the most prominent journalists whose work involves the critiquing of trans issues. His work has been negatively received by prominent members of trans community due to the obsessive nature of his reporting on detransition and transition regret and the omission of other trans issues such as interpersonal and legislative discrimination. So the language there. Yeah, basically like Jessie Singal, for longer than I've had a channel, has it's all been like your child saw a TikTok about how cool it is to be trans, and now they're 14 and they think they're trans, and if you don't do something, doctors will cut their tits off, and you need to stop it, because if they do that, they'll be miserable within 6 months. And that's like the whole line. It's like detransition fear for trans youth targeted at parents to exacerbate their fears. Controversial aspect of the blah-de-blah. Singal was listed on GLAAD's accountability project, which the org described as serving to document anti-LGBT words and actions from people. Supported by sex columnist Dan Savage? I guess I can kind of see that. Dan Savage is exactly the kind of gay who I could see doing this, well, let me have a no-nonsense transphobic attitude. Yeah, that tracks. I used to read his column back in, like, high school.
Singal is not transphobic at all. So yeah, it's good. It's fine. Trust me. And then of course he starts talking about like, oh, puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for children. I think the important thing to understand here, and this is a line that I've like continuously told people and like said on TYT myself, that like really what it boils down to is hormone replacement therapy is literally just puberty. Like at the end of the day, it's just puberty. And yeah, whether it's puberty with estrogen or testosterone, it's going to carry some risks just like it does with cisgender children. That's just part of puberty. And it's actually not all that different if it's a trans puberty or a cis puberty, believe it or not. And so anybody fear-mongering about the effects are permanent, yeah, that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? You know? Isn't that like the whole point? But if the effects were really entirely permanent, then transitioning as an adult wouldn't really work, would it? And yet, of course, it does. And you know, it's funny because their biggest fear...
Is that true, Vosh? It's complicated. All the cells in your body, all right, have a big switch. It's like a big comedy power breaker switch that you see in cartoons, all right? And it's the boy-girl switch. And depending on what hormones flood your body and at what time, the cell will flip the switch and behave differently. A lot of the stuff in our body, a lot of the growth that we experience during puberty is pre-coded biological changes that are determined by the activation code provided by the hormones that flood our bodies. I have giant, virile, overfull, rotund balls, which produce testosterone, and I'm simplifying it heavily. But that means that when I hit puberty, all of the little switches in my body got smacked right over into the mask bear bara category. But if you take hormone blockers, which would prevent that from happening, and then take estrogen, which would do the other switch, then yeah, you're basically just doing female puberty. There are some things that were predetermined before you were even born, like your genitals. But for other stuff, like breast growth, the way your bones develop, like the way your bone structure. You've probably seen young shits online. So young shit is a bitter trans woman term for a trans girl who got to transition early and looks good. But you can see trans women who benefited from hormone blockers. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. They look like girls, guys. Y'all seen that, right? We literally went over that big Reuters article. If you've taken puberty blockers and then you take estrogen, like there's a huge difference, even in bone structure. A lot of stuff gets affected by hormones, you know? Yes, the Giga Stacy Passoids. How to get over being jelly of that? Listen, you can be a beautiful woman even while being tall and having large hands too. Okay, don't freak out about it.
For what happens to children who are on hormone therapy is that a cisgender child might accidentally get gender dysphoria. You know, the thing that trans children just deal with if they're not allowed to get hormones. And so literally, this is just a nonsense argument of throwing all trans people under a bus out of the hypothetical fear that a cisgender person might take hormones and just realize that it's not for them. Which at that point, by the way, they could just stop taking hormones. And so really, when you take all this together, it seems like Anna Kasparian is fully engulfed into like the conspiracy theories against trans people. And I genuinely think that she believes a lot more than what she's saying, because I've just seen hints of like just some like extremely rabid transphobic nonsense. And with Cenk seems to be following Anna Kasparian along and kind of seems to be of the vibe of like, oh, no, I'm this big smart news guy and I've been doing this for a long time. I couldn't possibly be wrong, and very much relying on his lack of any type of understanding of biology and just making ridiculous assumptions about the difference between men and women and thinking that that's some sort of like universally applicable thing, not thinking about how hormones play a role in that, and of course is bouncing off of Anna's deeply transphobic energy. And of course, he can't help himself but frame himself as like the brilliant galaxy brain reasonable person. And of course, all these trans people are just ridiculous and out there and just radical and couldn't possibly be, you know, referencing like very basic science that is easy to go through. And any attempts to educate either Anna Kasparian or Cenk has kind of just been met with a lot of stubbornness, digging in their heels, rejecting the new information and replacing it with their own imaginations about how they think things should be. And it just continues to escalate over the past several months. And that fundamentally is why I just can't be a part of TYT anymore. It's just too much. It's ridiculous. Because at a certain point it becomes embarrassing for me. Because how can I, as a trans person who actually knows the science behind this, who actually is like actively trying to support trans people, as somebody that people look up to me, right? People literally like send me messages and be like, I'm so inspired, you know, you being a TYT, like.
Wouldn't getting HRT before puberty cause the reproductive system to not develop well? Well, yeah. Yeah, of course. Like, barely at all. Normally, they're okay with that. Did I show this? Oh, the announcement of her leaving.
So, unfortunately, Benny has decided to leave TYT. I am definitely heartbroken over her decision to do that.
That is like a me level misspeak right there. You know after that internally she was like, you know, she's like fuming. That was intent. No, I think that was an accident. It's just very funny given the I misgendered people a few times, ectoplasm, but I generally default to they, even with people whose pronouns I know, even with cis people. I just say they a lot. I've always done that, even before like getting woke or whatever, usually just because it's a lot simpler unless you're referring to two different people. Is TYT live? Yeah, it's live, right? Don't they do live on their Facebook show and clips of it go on YouTube? Yeah, they can't like redo it or whatever. It's just an accident. It's just funny. I don't think it's indicative or anything. I mean, it could be indicative of like internal reactionary thought, but we don't know.
It made me want to come out, or like my kids watch your show and you know, it just like, it gives them so much hope and they're so excited to see a trans person in the news. And I have to deal with messages from them now asking about, hey, what's going on with TIT? Hey, what the hell is happening here? Like, why is Anna saying this? Why is Cenk saying this? And that is just like the amount of like psychic damage that I have to take every single day dealing with not only the transphobic nonsense of the Republicans, but also whatever Cenk and Anna are on right now. It's just too much. And because at a certain point it becomes embarrassing, because then people think that I'm like endorsing their views, and I cannot. I will not. I refuse to lend any support to those views whatsoever, because fundamentally they're dangerous and they're ridiculous and like they're straight up evil. It is just the shameless, selfish ignorance that is fueling this, and just this self-importance coming from both Cenk and Anna, this idea that they don't actually have to listen. So no, yeah, I'm done with TYT because I can't let anybody think that I have any type of support for their opinions here, because they're just ridiculous. And it's just gotten to be too much for me to deal with all of this nonsense. And the last thing I want is for them to be able to say, oh no, it's fine. We have like a transgender host, so it's all good actually. Because no, it's not all good actually. It is in fact quite bad.
I think that it takes some backbone to quit over this. I think that's a respectable decision. Her desire to kulaks to death notwithstanding, I think that's admirable. From the Daily Dose of Hasanabi. Yeah, because everyone got to all the news stories before me, because I've been gone for 2 weeks. And hey, I think I'm doing pretty good. I've been streaming for 2 hours, and I've coughed a little bit. I'm talking slower than I normally do, and it's been a struggle. Like I'm exerting a lot of effort to not cough while talking, but I'm able to, which is good.